You are calling us to follow. You are calling us to trust. You have seen all our tomorrows. Greater things are yet to come. You will lead us to new horizons.
With today's sermon in our series, Life Hacks, Pocket Tips from Proverbs for Better Living, here is Senior Pastor Mark Rader.
When I was a boy, I took classical guitar lessons for a while. And it was only, maybe a semester or two that I took these lessons. And I distinctly remember at one point, I like to think it was just before Christmas. There was a bit of a break before my next lesson. And I don't remember exactly what my teacher or my instructor said to me, but I got the impression that the piece of music he had given me was too hard for me. So I fell for the reverse psychology hook, line, and sinker, and I thought, well, yeah, I'm going to show you. Now, he didn't doubt my ability. It wasn't any of that. It wasn't one of those kind of hurtful moments, but I just remember practicing this piece of music over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until I could play it perfectly. And the next time we had the lesson, I was able to play that little piece, Green Sleeves, right? At least the first page. I think that's all I had at the time, right? But I was able to play it. And what happened was not just that I, proved my instructor wrong, but I also ended up internalizing that piece of music. So while I very rarely play the guitar to this day, if I had a little bit of time, I could still play that first page of Green Sleeves. So I can get all the fingering right because I internalized it. And ultimately, of course, we want to internalize the things in our lives, right? I've recently started teaching my middle daughter how to drive. She just got her L plate, so she's on her learner's license. And just a reminder of how internalized driving has become for me. I don't even think about it anymore. And so to actually stop and try to instruct someone else in something that has become second nature is actually really hard. Trying to break down what you do so that you can give some instructions is actually a really helpful exercise. And ultimately, when it comes to the wisdom of Proverbs, we want to internalize these truths so that they are readily available for us. Right? We want them to become second nature so that their wisdom is easily applied in our lives. And I'd like to share with you a proverb out of chapter 25 that I believe has some application for us that I think should become second nature for us, but might take us a little while to unpack it. It's in chapter 25, verse 16, and it reads this: "If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit." Which on first glance doesn't seem particularly profound at all. Like, do we really need the Bible to tell us that? I myself had a rather unfortunate experience with a bag of sour cream and onion chips at the back of a bus in year 8, and I can no longer eat sour cream and onion chips. I had more than enough, and it didn't end well, and I'm really not keen to go back there. But did I need the Bible to be able to tell me that? I probably could have worked that out on my own, and in fact, this reminds us again of the importance of observation in proverbial wisdom. The Proverbs are wisdom that has come from observing the world. To some degree, you could talk about them as being secular in one sense. Now, it's not safe to say that they're totally secular, because in the ancient world in particular, every aspect of life was considered to be a reflection of your relationship with God. And so the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, the recognition that God has created the universe. He's created the material universe of birds and trees and rocks and bees and all that kind of stuff, and the moral universe as well. And that by observing God's world, we can discern particular patterns, and living in those patterns will lead ultimately to success. But this observational nature is different from a lot of the rest of Scripture, isn't it? The rest of Scripture we're used to, for instance, hearing "Thus saith the Lord" from the prophetic voice. We're used to visions or dreams. We're used to direct encounters with God. We're also used to hearing, the great story of redemption, the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of Abraham, of Moses, of David, of the Exodus from Egypt. All all of these sorts of stories, and very, very rarely are they referred to at all in wisdom literature. We don't hear about the law. We don't hear much about priests or the temple or offerings. The interest instead is wrapped around everyday life, about the power of words, both to build up and to tear down, about the importance of marrying well, about the significance of good friendships, and the like. And so, when we come to the wisdom literature, we are presented with proverbs that are designed to be used in our day-to-day life. They're designed to help us to make good choices based on the moral patterns that God has built into the world around us. So like a connect the dots pattern, or a paint by numbers, or a blueprint, or a sewing pattern, or a recipe, they outline for us how to be successful in life. And by following the recipe, by following the pattern, by following the numbers around the page, we will be successful in that which we have had a crack at. But to internalize those sorts of things, to internalize a recipe, to internalize a song or a sheet of music, to attain a skill like driving that becomes second nature to us, we have to repeat them, don't we? There are certain recipes now that I can make without referring to the recipe. I've made it often enough that I can just make it. Right? Fried eggs aren't that hard, right? It's that whole thing, one egg and there you go, right? But the internalization of Proverbs, right, requires us to become familiar with them so that it can become second nature. And like we have to make sure we've got all the ingredients in the pantry or the right supplies for the pattern that we are designing, we also need to sometimes unpack the proverb. So I want to take some time to unpack this proverb for us. If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. Because there are some things that, I guess, set it apart as being very, ordinary. I mean, we don't think much about the significance of honey. I can walk into any shop and I can select how many different types of honey? Depending on how sweet I would like it, what color I would like it, what the consistency that I would like it, where I would like it to be from, right? We don't think much about it. But in the ancient world, honey was the only natural sweetener. And it was a luxury good. So when Jacob sends his sons to Pharaoh, he sends his sons into Egypt, and he sends them with a gift to Pharaoh. So this is a gift to the king of Egypt, to the leader of the most significant nation in the world. And in the gift are a number of kind of the goods of the land, including a small jar of honey. In 1 Kings chapter 14, one of the kings of Israel sends a delegation to a prophet in order to hear from the prophet the word of the Lord, and sends some loaves of bread and some honey. These were gifts that were fit for kings. To actually receive a gift of honey was quite remarkable. It was a symbol of the good life. So when the people of Israel are wandering around the wilderness and they're waiting to enter into the land of Canaan is described as a land flowing with milk and honey. It was the symbol of all that is good in life. And it may interest you, it was used medicinally in the ancient world, particularly for burns and infections. It was quite significant in that capacity. And it was also used by lovers very early on. While they did not use the word sugar, they certainly used the word honey to describe their lover. There's an ancient Sumerian poem that's entitled "The Honey Man," who sweetens me from head to toe, is the way the poem goes. And in Song of Songs, we find the same kind of language, where we find this in chapter 4, verse 11. "Your lips drop sweetness as the honeycomb, my bride. Milk and honey are under your tongue." And so honey in and of itself in this proverb is not just talking about finding something kind of sweet or finding something kind of nice. It's talking about finding something quite extraordinary, a luxury, something that was quite precious, that was quite rare. And so for many, you would assume that they very rarely encountered or had honey on their toast or whatever it was that they had in the ancient world. But it's also then interesting to note that this proverb says, if you find honey. Because that implies that what we're talking about here is wild honey. Right? Beekeeping was known in the ancient world, but it was a boutique industry. So you didn't find beekeeping all over the place. It was quite rare. And so most of the time, if you were to encounter honey, it was wild honey. You might remember the story of Samson. In Judges chapter 14, a lion jumps out at him, he tears it apart and keeps going on his way, as you do when you're the strongest man in the world. And a little while later, we're not sure how much longer, I'd hate to actually know, he comes back and checks out the lion that he tore apart, and their bees have made a hive in the carcass. And so, as you do when you're Samson, you eat some of the honey that you found in a carcass, right? But it's honey. He makes a riddle out of it, ends up kind of using that as an excuse to destroy more Philistines, which was kind of his favorite hobby. Jonathan in 1 Samuel chapter 14, likewise, the Israelites are chasing after their enemies, and Jonathan finds some honey, dips the end of his spear into it and has some, and we're told that his eyes brightened and he was ready again to pursue the chase. This is the finding of honey, wild honey out wherever you are. And that reminds us then that what this proverb is talking about is not about producing something or creating something good, but about the act of grace by which you stumble upon something that you have not earned. You have found honey. You have done nothing to deserve it. You've done nothing to make it happen. You've just been wandering along and bang, you found honey. Wow. What an amazing, amazing act of grace. So the proverb says, if you find honey, don't eat too much or you'll be sick. The principle here is, I guess, that a good thing can be ruined if you have too much of it, right? Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. And this goes beyond just food. In chapter 25, verse 17, it says, seldom set foot in your neighbor's house, too much of you, and they will hate you, right? We might say it's familiarity that breeds contempt. So it's not just about honey that we're talking about or the good things in life. Too much of you is problematic as well. So what does this proverb tell us then about the way in which God has made our world? What does it tell us about how God made the world and how we can live successfully within it? And I think that there's a couple of really helpful things to recognize. First of all, this proverb says that if you find honey, eat some honey. We are designed to enjoy good things. It's remarkable, isn't it? Our sense of taste and touch and sight and hearing and smell allows us to enjoy the world in which we live. We hear beautiful sounds. We can touch beautiful things. We can taste delicious things and smell them. Our senses are joined by, what we're increasingly knowing about are the neurology. Endorphins, oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, all reflect this capacity of our bodies to enjoy things. And that there are things that happen in our bodies when we experience good things that make the experience even better. We are designed to experience good things. And so if we find something good, we shouldn't kind of disparage it or leave it to one side. We should enjoy it. That's certainly part of how God has designed and created the world. However, we are designed for more than pleasure, aren't we? Our senses, while they can help us identify things that are pleasant and pleasing, also are designed to warn us of dangers, aren't they? So the fingers and the nerve endings that can feel something soft like silk or velvet also are designed to keep us from touching things that are too hot or too cold. Our sense of taste that can identify things that are beautiful and delicious is also designed to help us identify things that are bitter and perhaps not good for us. You ever smelt a bit of milk to see if it's still okay? That's our recognition that our sense of smell is not only for beautiful things, but also to warn us when the milk is off and we need to walk down to the servo and get something more. We are designed to enjoy good things, but that is not why we have been created. Hedonism, This lifestyle that affirms that only pleasure is valuable in terms of its experience effectively cripples our discipleship because it doesn't allow us to engage, for instance, with the suffering of Christ. It doesn't allow us to identify with any sense of putting off the immediate for later. It doesn't allow us to deal with the hard aspects of our lives. But I think this also tells us something a little bit then, or informs how we think about our own world. You see, I think it would be fair to say that in Australia in particular, and I think in many places in the West, we have found honey, haven't we? By virtue of where we live. By virtue of where we were born, by virtue of the opportunities that we have. We have opportunities, seemingly unlimited opportunities for enjoyment. Travel, concerts, great food and drink, access to knowledge, fashion, new ideas, like you name it, we have it. We have found it. And while we've worked hard, we haven't really done much to deserve it, have we? There's nothing inherent about us, well, about you as Australians and myself as a North American, as to say that we deserve to have good things happen to us. There's nothing inherent about us, right? We have simply found honey. And as people of faith, I think, therefore, it's appropriate that we respond to this gracious and undeserved blessing of God with gratitude, isn't it? It's appropriate for us to respond with worshipful gratitude, to be thankful to God for the good things that we enjoy, the opportunities that are before us, the pleasurable experiences that are so open to us, to respond with gratitude. But if you're anything like me, too often I think we respond exactly like our society, and that is a little immoderately. We find honey and we eat all of it. We enjoy too much of it. And it's actually reflected in some of the kind of the popular proverbs and sayings in our society, isn't it? Mae West is attributed with having said, "Too much of a good thing can be wonderful." Now, she's right, isn't she? There are times when too much of a good thing is indeed wonderful. But it strikes against the truth of this aspect of wisdom, that there's a time when that's not the case. I really like watching Mythbusters, and one of their kind of common phrases is, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. That sounds like our society, right? We want to live life to the max. Have you heard of Fomo? The fear of missing out. It is described by Wikipedia as a pervasive apprehension that others might be having rewarding experiences from which one is absent. And this is it's a thing. That people are fearful of missing out, that other people are enjoying things that I'm not enjoying right now, and what am I missing out on? Again, Ecclesiastes 3, you've heard me say this before, there's a time for everything, and we say that time is now. This is our immoderate society. We have found honey, and we just gobble it up. Now, to be fair, I did misquote the proverb a little while ago. I said, if you find honey, don't eat too much, or you'll be sick. But the proverb actually says, if you find honey, eat just enough. Eat just enough. How much is just enough? How much is just enough? And I was thinking about food in this relationship, and I thought, well, so how do I know that I've had too much? And usually my practice is to keep going until I've had one spoonful too many. And then I'm like, oh, I can't have another thing. That's how I figure out how much is too much. But this asks me to consider how much is just enough. And I wonder, what is it about us in our society that means we have to go right to the line, right up to the line and go, yeah, I'm stuffed. I couldn't eat another bite. And we go, there, I've had enough. It seems to me that wisdom in this context is found in under-consuming. that wisdom, the way God made the world is actually that success, that benefit, that life, that the good things is found in under consuming, not in squeezing every last drop out of life. It's not found in living life to the max, but in living life in moderation. And boy, do we need to hear this again, don't we? As a society, as a culture, how much is just enough? And it is so countercultural, so subversive to consider that it's actually an under-consuming. I mean, think again about the proverb. If you find honey, eat just enough. You've been wandering down the road and you hear some buzzing and you kind of take a couple steps off the path and there is wild honey. I mean, you can't eat the lot. You're only going to have a little bit along the way. Unless you go home and get jars, which would be our response, right? Let's go home and get every jar we can and fill it all up and take it home and sell it and make a profit, right? You're not going to be able to eat too much. You're continuing on your road. Don't eat so much that you're not able to continue. It is this challenge, I think, that is the most profound for us. To try to figure out how much is just enough. How much is just enough? You see, I think for those of us with faith, we ought to cultivate in our lives an attitude of gratitude, a response that recognizes the good things that we have been given, the things that we have found, shall we say, the opportunities that lie before us, and to be worshipfully thankful to God, our provider, for all that we have, and try to figure out how we can begin to under-consume, to actually have a little instead of a lot. The only time that we really do this really is when we're talking about diets, isn't it? You know, I'll just have a thin slice of cake, right? We have just a little rather than a lot. And perhaps we need to diet across our board, right? Not just food, but in everything that we do. Do we have to have every experience? Do we have to travel to every continent? Do we have to go to every country? Do we have to see everything? Do we have to experience every concert? Do we have to do it all? Or is it possible that we could underconsume? And I don't know where that line is. Don't know where that line is for you. I don't know where that line is for me. Often the line, of course, is that you've gone a little bit further than I would have, right? That's how we work out that line, in true Pharisaical style. But we need to work out how we are able to underconsume, because this is how God has made the world. He has made the world in such a way that we will experience good things, and when we experience them, we ought to enjoy them. And we ought to do so with gratitude, but too much of a good thing and we will be sick. And we see the sickening of our society, don't we? We see the sickening of our society through overconsumption. We find good things and we have far too much. But God has created the world in such a way that grateful underconsumption is the best and wisest way to live. So consider the honey that you have found. Consider the good things that we experience. Enjoy those things with gratitude to our provider. But let us also consider how we might draw a line of underconsumption. Because when we do so, we will not have missed out. We will, in fact, have begun to live wisely. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. Another pocket tip for better living from the book of Proverbs.
We hope you've enjoyed today's New Horizons program. You can download the companion study guides for each program from the Guymer Baptist Church website. Go to guymerbaptist.org.au/New Horizons. These are available for each episode, or you can download the whole series. Guymer Baptist Church in Sydney's southern suburbs is a contemporary evangelical church seeking to serve our local community and help them to know Jesus. At the heart of all we do is the desire to help people love God in all aspects of their lives. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can do so via the contact page on our website or visit our Facebook page.
In the West, in particular, we have found honey. We have no end of things to enjoy, and we have been created to enjoy them, and we ought to, with gratitude to our provider. However, too much of a good thing, this proverb reminds us, can actually make us sick. And so we are called to live the way of wisdom in underconsumption and grateful enjoyment of all that God has given us. I trust that you've been challenged to consider how you enjoy the things around you, how you respond to the good things that God has given you. We hope to see you again real soon. God bless.